While the NHL playoffs are right around the corner, some teams are already looking beyond them to the future. And in some cases, it's very bright with teams having built strong prospect pools and draft picks for the future, while there are others who are staring into the abyss of another long rebuild. Where a team falls on this spectrum depends not just on how good their young prospects are, but how good the young players already on their team have performed, which is why I am ranking every team in terms of how bright their future is based on how good their young players are and how good their prospect pool is perceived to be. And while I'll go into a bit more depth on the top 10 teams, for the bottom 22, we're going to just have them broken into tiers. And the bottom tier are the teams that I think just have absolutely bleak futures. These include, from worst to best, the Colorado Avalanche, Florida Panthers, Winnipeg Jets, Pittsburgh Penguins, Edmonton Oilers, and Toronto Maple Leafs. All these teams have prospect pools that are considered in the bottom half of the NHL, and none of them are getting significant contributions from any player on their team that's under the age of 25. The best U25 player on any of these teams is Matthew Knies of the Maple Leafs, who is very good, but not a foundational building block piece. And since they don't have a lot of other good young players around him, it's going to be rough for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Basically, if you're in this tier and you're not competing for a Stanley Cup this year, or you haven't won one in the past like the Panthers, it's looking really rough for you for the next 5 years. But at least teams like Florida can rest on the fact that they won back-to-back cups. The next 6 teams above them also have pretty bleak futures, but at least they might have something going for them. Maybe a couple of good young players or a decent prospect pool. These include Vegas Golden Knights, LA Kings, Tampa Bay Lightning, New York Rangers, Vancouver Canucks, and Dallas Stars. Most of these teams are either going for it this year, like Dallas and Tampa, have gone for it very consistently, like Vegas and New York, or are just complete dumpster fires like Vancouver. Honestly, this team, if they don't win the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes, or if they don't get a blue chip prospect in the next draft, they are just 3 or 4 years away from being even remotely viable. It is a disaster for Vancouver. For the other teams, it's mainly a story of you've got some good young pieces and just a bad prospect pool, so your window to win is kind of now. Well, maybe not for the Rangers and Kings. Now, the next 5 teams above them are in a pretty good position to be competitive now and in the future. None of them have top tier prospects or young players, but they've got a solid enough collection of young talent, and they should be positioned pretty well in the future. This would include teams like the Devils, Predators, Bruins, Wild, and the Ottawa Senators. Teams like the Devils and the Wild have really good young cores and just kind of weak prospect pools. While teams like Nashville and Boston, their prospect pools are good but not elite, and they have some young talent but nothing that's really earth-shattering. Just about all these teams probably just need one more player to emerge as a legitimate threat, and they could be a very viable contender in a few years. Now, the other tier above them that's just outside of the top 10, these are teams that have built well for the future, and a lot of them are actually competitive now. This includes teams like Seattle, Washington, the Islanders, the Blues, and the Hurricanes. Now, the Kraken are an interesting one because they are considered to have one of the better prospect pools, but they just do not have any young players in their lineup that can do anything. Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, Cabo Caco, none of them are really standing out as impact players. For these other teams, they generally have good prospect pools and some good young players that they could build around in the future. And obviously the one outlier that people are going to point to is the Islanders. And yes, Matthew Schaefer is an elite young player in the NHL. But that's the problem. He's kind of their only really elite young player, and the teams that are ahead of them in these rankings have multiple young players and much better prospect pools. So let's get into the top 10. The number 10 team with the brightest future in the NHL is the Calgary Flames. And this team is basically entirely carried by the fact that they have one of the best prospect pools in the entire NHL. The young players that have played for them so far this year have done not much of anything or have even regressed in some cases. You're really putting a lot of hope and faith that guys like Parek, Hanzik, Colin Potter, Reshny, and Brustowitz all develop into very good to probably, in Parek's case, elite NHL players, because the guys that you have in your lineup right now, guys like Coronado and Zari, just not doing much of anything. The one saving grace on your young team is obviously Dustin Wolf, but even he has had a pretty rough sophomore year, but I'm pretty confident he'll rebound. Now, the number 9 team in terms of the brightest future actually has the weakest prospect pool of anybody in the top 10. That's the Philadelphia Flyers. Porter Martone is a really good prospect, but I'm not in love of much of what else they have in the cupboard. They do have a pretty good collection of young players. Trevor Zegras highlighting the group after being traded here and reviving his career in Philly. Matvei Michkov, if they ever figured out how to properly use them. I know that Cutter Gauthier is tearing it up in Anaheim, but Jamie Drysdale's been pretty good for them on the back end. And then they also got pretty decent young players like Cam York, Nikita Krabenkin, Emil Andre. They're set up pretty decently going forward in the future, and they're not relying on having these great players come out of the minors and the college ranks to take over for them. Number 8 on my list is the Utah Mammoth, and this one surprised me because they're considered to have one of the best prospect pools in the NHL. Loved TJ Ginla coming out, and they've also got some good prospects like Denoye, Emil Boot, Simashev, Maverick Lamoureux. A lot of these guys have already gotten their first taste of NHL action. The problem is that the guys that are producing most for them have kind of aged out of being part of the youth movement. Obviously, Clayton Keller is 27, Nick Schmaltz is 29. Dylan Gunther is probably their best young player at age 22, but you would really love to see more out of players like him and JJ Peterka. Logan Cooley obviously was hurt for a lot of the year, but you would just like to see a little bit more out of the players that you already have in your lineup and not rely so much on the guys coming up. Next up, another team that doesn't have the best prospect pool, but they've got good young players, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. Kirill Morchenko has just been unbelievable for them this year, and quietly, Adam Fantilli has had a really good season. Denton Mateychuk on the back end has been incredibly good for them. And then they also have a couple of good young pieces in Sillinger and Voronkov. Obviously, Kent Johnson, we'll see whatever happens with that. But then when you look at their prospect pool, it's a little bit barren. I like Caden Lindstrom, and I liked Jackson Smith last year. A lot of the other guys, I don't know how impactful they're going to be. Number 6 on my list, another team with an elite prospect pool and some really good young players, and that's the Detroit Red Wings. Lucas Raymond is one of the best under 25 players in the entire NHL, and then Mo Sider on the back end, but you've also gotten some good play so far in limited spurts from Emmett Finney, and Edmondson, Axel Sandin-Pellikka, and Marco Kasper, who's making me look like such a fool when I called him one of the worst players in the NHL earlier this year. And then you look at their prospect pool, 2 really good young goalies in Sebastian Casa and Trey Augustine, along with Carter Bear. They've got some good reinforcements coming up in the next few years. Above them, though, one of the hottest young teams in the NHL, of course, the Anaheim Ducks. They took a lot of shit from people, me included, when they took some of these players in the slots that they did in the draft, and it has mostly paid off for them. Beckett Seneca and Leo Carlson have obviously been incredible this year, but the Cutter Gauthier trade was just masterful. He looks like an absolute stud for them. But then you look at their prospect pool, Stian Solberg, and one of my favorite prospects in the entire NHL right now, Roger McQueen. This team could potentially be loaded going forward and a real threat in the West. They come in slightly behind a team with a generational prospect in their fold, talking of course about the Chicago Blackhawks, who yes have Connor Bedard, who has played a lot better this year than he has in the previous seasons, and they have one of the strongest prospect pools in the entire NHL with Frondell, who just got called up, Boyver, who looked great in college, and then also guys like Nestersil and Rinzel, and they've also got some really good young players like Frank Nazar, Artyom Levshinov, Oliver Moore, and the surprising emergence of Ryan Green. They are set up in a really good position going forward, but not quite as good as the top 3 teams. And at number 3, a team with maybe the best young player in the entire NHL, the San Jose Sharks. Macklin Celebrini this year has been exceptional. This is the stuff generational players are made out of. And the Sharks have, by most people's estimation, the best, if not the second best, prospect pool in the entire NHL. They have guys in the wings like Michael Misa, who has just gotten his first taste of the NHL, Igor Chernyshев, who's also gotten some looks in the NHL, Quentin Musty, Leo Salin-Wallenius, and then young players like Sam Dickinson who are playing in the NHL. With the other young core pieces like Will Smith, Askarov, Mukmadulin. The only thing holding this team back is the fact that none of these other players have stepped up to become not even the level of player that Celebrini is, but close to an all-star or high-end top 6 or top 4 level player right now. I think there's still a chance that they can develop into that, but right now it is firmly the Celebrini show, and he needs some help and some firepower to step up and join him. Once they do, man, the Sharks are going to be fun to watch. Between number 2 and number 1, it was incredibly close. But number 2 on my list is the Buffalo Sabres. Really, between them and Montreal, it's a matter of, do you prefer having young talent now or having the better prospect pool? Because Buffalo's got the better young talent now with guys like Deline, Power, Donan Benson, Jack Quinn, Samuelson on the back end. This is a team that already has most of their key pieces on the roster. But the prospect pool's a little bit weaker now, especially compared to the Montreal Canadiens, who are just loaded with guys who have not even made the roster, like Reinbacher and Haig and Zorovsky, along with the guys who are performing at elite levels in the NHL. Obviously, Lane Hudson and Cole Caulfield being the big leaders, but you've got Slavkovsky, who's turned into almost a point-a-game player. Even Demingdov, who's making those teams ahead of Montreal, who passed on him, look absolutely ridiculous. Caden Gooley, and now Jacob Fowler in net for them. This team is built out to be competitive for the next decade. And as a guy who doesn't really particularly care for Montreal fans, it's going to be a rough next few years.